now I'm going to turn it over to Desiree Lapahie, who is with NICOA. She is our data analyst. And Cheryl Archibald, who is also with NICOA, and she's our executive assistant to the executive director. They're going to talk a little bit about why data matters. So go ahead, Desiree, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am so glad you are able to join me for today's presentation of Why Data Matters, presented by me, Desiree Lapahie. And Cheryl will come on later on in the presentation. So next slide, please. Now, when you think of data, I'm sure the first thing you think of is just a bunch of numbers and maybe some graphs. But what do these numbers tell us? Well, in this presentation, I'd like to present to you how data can be used and what types of stories it can tell us. Next slide. Now, whether you realize it or not, data is everywhere, from sports to health to even in commercials. You know, in sports, you can see if your team has a 60% chance of making it to the championship, or even in commercials where 8 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste. But you're probably thinking, why does this data matter to me? And I will discuss that in the next slide. So data not only measures progress, but it also inspires it. For example, accurate reporting allows us to see where successful policy are taking root, so that we may replicate those successes to other areas. But for each success that data uncovers, significant hurdles still remain. But that's okay, because data can help us address these hurdles. Next slide. Now, how does data affect you out there? Well, the data that's collected are helpful for state, federal agencies, and important stakeholders. For example, NICOA has a project called the Long-Term Support and Service Survey available to the public. And we're looking to find what type of LTSS services tribes and American Indian people are interested in. From the survey, we hope to create resources for LTSS services in Indian country. And it all starts with the data that's collected from this survey. So this is one of the ways that data can affect you. Next slide, please. Another way data can affect you is in advocacy efforts. Complete, accurate information is the backbone of all advocacy efforts. It can bolster your case and explain why this policy change is needed and why it works. You know, for example, and this is just my example, this is not, I did not take this from anywhere, so do not quote me on this. This is just a hypothetical. So for example, the adolescent crime rate has decreased by 25% since there are more afternoon programs, after school programs, I mean. Now, an advocate can use this data to push for more funding to keep the after school programs going. Or an opponent can use this data to say that, well, adolescent crime rates are down, but vandalism has actually increased. So data can be used to boost your efforts, or they can be used against your efforts. So it's important to question whether the data you see actually supports these people's claims. Next slide. Now here are some tips when you're questioning the data. One of the questions you would want to ask is, how many people were surveyed? For example, if a poll asked 5 natives whether it was Indian taco or Navajo taco, those 5 natives do not represent the 5.2 million natives who know it is Navajo taco. Just kidding, I'm impartial. And the second tip is to beware the not so spectacular statistic. You know, those that you usually see in commercials. In 2007, Colgate was ordered to stop using 8 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste in Britain because The type of survey that they did actually showed that while dentists did recommend Colgate, they also recommended a different competitor toothpaste. And the way they were marketing their toothpaste made it sound like the dentists were like, oh, Colgate all the way. But that's not actually true. So beware those statistics. And this actually follows into the next question of who did the primary research of the analysis. Now, in the Colgate or in any other company, private company, they will do polling until they get the stats that they want. And you can see this in beauty companies where they'll have, oh, 80% of women saw a difference overnight. Well, that 80% might only be from 5 people. So they'll just stop polling. They'll be like, oh, 5 people, we got that 80%, let's cut that off. But in government institutions, they'll poll everybody. So you'll have a more accurate account of whether it is Indian taco or Navajo taco. Okay, next slide, please. Now, another important use of data is in voting. Voting is not only your civic duty, but it can also be the turning point of the election. Now, most states have a winner takes all system where the popular vote winner gets the state's electoral votes. Now you think, oh, my vote couldn't possibly make such a difference. Well, it can. In 2017, a Virginian House of Delegates race ended in a tie out of 23,000 votes cast. They had to figure out the winner by pulling a name out of a canister. And the result was heightened by the fact that the win gave Republican control of the state house by a single seat. So, a single voter could turn the tides. Next slide. Now you're thinking, okay, so I know why data matters, but why should I vote? Well, your vote may not directly elect the president, but if your vote joins enough others in your voting district or county, your vote undoubtedly matters when it comes to the electoral results. Remember, there are also local and state elections to consider. Now, while the presidential and other national elections usually get a significant voter turnout, local elections are typically decided by a smaller group of voters. This means that low turnout means that important local issues are determined by a limited group of voters, making one single vote more statistically meaningful. Now, I will turn it over to Cheryl, who will tell us why data matters when it comes to the census. Next slide.
Good afternoon. And again, thank you for joining us for this interesting presentation with all the different information that can help you get out there and vote. I'm Cheryl Archibald. I am with NICOA, the executive assistant here. And part of data is the 2020 census. So why do we want to participate? The census is critical to our community because by participating, you're speaking for generations of Native people that have come before you and yet to come. Census data can help determine our Native communities' needs for schools, housing, healthcare facilities, senior centers, and many other programs that benefit our communities. If we don't go out and take the census and let them know where we are and who we are, we could lose money in the future. We want to make sure that our Native communities are visible and heard. Our communities are growing, and filling out the census will ensure that we are counted and that we are heard. Everyone needs to be counted to make sure that we're getting our fair share of representation in local, state, and national government. Both Jacqueline and Becky had mentioned the distrust that we have with the federal government because of past circumstance. We need to overcome that and show them who we are and that we do have a voice and we do matter. Information gathered from the 2020 census will determine where more than $800 billion a year in federal funding will go over the next 10 years, including but not limited to medical services, WIC programs, childcare, funding for public schools, funding for low-income housing, senior centers, senior programs, and special and adult education programs. More and more of our elder communities are going back to school. Our elders are finding that they have the time now to go back to school and finish that degree that they started and would like to finish. Community leaders will use this information to plan and decide where to build new schools, recreation areas, hospitals, senior centers, and fire departments over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. Is the census data safe? Now, the Census Bureau is bound by Title 13 to keep your information confidential. Under this title, the Census Bureau cannot release any identifiable information about you, your home, or your business, even to law enforcement or anybody else who asks them. Violation of this is a federal crime, and it is punishable by prison and or a fine of up to $250,000. So the answers you provide are only used for statistics. You are kept anonymous. The Census Bureau is not permitted to release your responses in any way that would identify you personally or anyone in your household personally. If the Census Bureau is talking with you, they will never ask for your full Social Security number. They may ask for the last four, but never the full number. They will never ask for a bank account or a credit card number. They will not ask anything on behalf of a political party, and they will not ask for money or donations. Next slide, please. So how do you respond to the census? We now have until October 31st to respond. They extended the deadline again. You can go online to my2020census.gov and you can complete the online questionnaire. It's available in 17 different languages online. To access it, go to the website. On the top of that website, there is a global icon where you can determine if you want to change the language you want to participate with. If you want to use your native language, click on the icon, choose your native language, and you can participate with your native language. If you don't want to get on the computer, you can always just make a phone call at 844-330-2020, and that's for the English hotline. They're open every day from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time. There are also other language options, and they're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. The Census Bureau also offers web pages and guides in 59 non-English languages, including sign language, as well as guides in Braille and large print. So everybody has a way to fill out the census. If you prefer to do it by mail, back in March, the Census Bureau began mailing out invitations. In mid-April, they mailed out more paper questionnaires to the people that hadn't responded online or by phone. If you are responding by mail, make sure you use a blue or black pen. Do not use a pencil. It's not dark enough to fill in the blanks. And once it's finished, you can mail it to the address on the screen, the Census Bureau National Processing Center, 1201 East 10th Street, Jefferson, Indiana, 47132. Now, even though you've done this, you may still see an in-person census taker. Next slide, please. These takers are walking around the neighborhoods and they may visit your home and collect the 2020 census data. Make sure that if someone comes to your door and says they're with the census, look for these items that they will be carrying. They'll have census bags and other equipment with their logo on it. They may also deliver a paper questionnaire, hanging it on the front door or a gate in a water-resistant plastic bag like the one shown on the screen. But if you're talking to them directly, make sure that they have a valid ID badge with their photograph, that it has U.S. Department of Commerce watermark on it, and an expiration date. We don't want you to give your information to the wrong people. They have identification and they have plenty of things to show that they are with the census. So what you can expect if someone comes to the door, the census takers will all be wearing masks and following the local public health guidelines when they visit your home. The census takers were all required to complete a virtual COVID-19 training on social distancing and other health and safety protocols before beginning their work in neighborhoods. And if the census taker comes to your area and they are not speaking your specific language or you're not comfortable with them, you can request a visit from a different census taker that speaks your language. They will only arrive in your home between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., including weekends. If no one's home, they will leave a brochure or a notice of their visit on your front door or on your gate, giving you information about how to fill out your census form, either online, by phone, or by mail. Next slide, please. And there are some simple questions on the census. They do not have the U.S. citizen question on there. They ask how many people are living in your household on April 1st, 2020. April 1st, 2020 was the day the census started. That is the reason for that date. And they want to count everybody living in your home on that date. There's a couple follow-up questions to that. You know, were there any additional people living here on April 1st that you didn't include in question 1? Is the house an apartment or a mobile home? These questions are specifically asked so that they can produce statistics about home ownership and renting. They also help with administering housing programs, planning and decision-making for the neighborhoods where you're located. So they will also ask for a telephone number. And the only reason they ask for that is if there is something on that official census form that you send in that they have a question about. That's the only time they will use that number. And then it goes into, it asks you about person one's name and person one's sex and age, date of birth, and their race. And they'll ask this for each person in the house. And the reason they ask these questions is the statistics to better understand the size and characteristics of different age groups, different races, different areas, different locations. The agencies use this data to plan and fund government programs that support specific age groups, such as young children and the elders. They're also looking for grandparents raising grandchildren, multi-family, multi-generational families that are living in one house or in two. They ask about how the second person is related to the first person, and they just want to develop more information about families, households, and groups that are living together, the different relationships data. And that way they can create new programs and fund programs that will support families, including families that are raising children alone, grandparents that have taken in the grandchildren, or grandparents that are even helping take care of their child and the grandchildren. So all these questions that they ask are only for statistical information. They don't categorize it by name or your social, anything like that. They categorize it by the different areas that the questions pertain to, so they can get statistics to better fund the areas that they are looking at. So if you want more information about the census, you can go to 2020census.gov, and the specific website /BN/about-questions will give you more specific information about why each question is asked and how important it is. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to help answer them for Desiree or I.
Cheryl, we do have a comment. It says, as the SCSEP director, what I am seeing is that areas of Indian country are not getting money coming to their areas for the program because of the poor census information. It's more important than ever to encourage everyone to complete their census forms.
And that is absolutely correct. They're missing a lot of data from the Native Americans because of the history and the bad blood between the federal and the Native Americans. We have to be counted. They are a large group. The more we can get counted and the more accurate count we get, the more money we can get funded for their programs. And that is why we're trying so hard to get this out to the pueblos. And the people that are out in the neighborhoods are from that local neighborhood. So it should be somebody that either you know or your family member knows out there asking these questions and helping fill out these forms.
And I believe the census was extended until October 30th. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It is extended until October 30th. So you still have another month to go out and fill this out. There are still legislation, there are still people pushing to have it extended even farther into the new year, because the results that they are getting is not what we want. We're getting 50% and lower response rates from Pueblos, and we want more than that. We need more than that. There are a lot of natives out there that need to be counted.
Very, very, very true. Thank you so much, Cheryl.